Hello. The 5 in 5 series continues. Absolutely, incredibly delighted to be joined by Mutugi, who is a Senior Associate in Capital Markets and Regulatory team at Bowman's. Bowman's, for those of you who may be listening to this that don't know, one of the main, biggest and best law firms on the African continent, and they are growing and building in the Kenyan market as well, originally from South Africa, where I am. Mutugi joins us to discuss the opportunities, the growth, what's happening in the Nairobi and other city markets in Kenya, economically, from a legal perspective, how are things changing, and really how is it growing as a major financial center on the African continent as well. I'm recording this about 3 weeks before we head to Nairobi for our Leaders in Law series, which is an incredible networking evening where we're going to be celebrating the in-house market, and 120 of the leading general counsels in Kenya are going to be joining us in July, and I cannot wait. I've just come back from Kenya, as in I was there for Christmas with my family, and I'm really looking forward to going again. Kenya is a very important market to the African continent. It's a very important market to us here at GRM, so I'm absolutely delighted that Mutugi is going to be joining us for this 5 in 5 to give you guys a bit of an insight into what's going on in the Kenyan legal market.
Well, right now, economically, things have kind of are in a state of flux, but there are silver linings where you look for them. I think technically you may consider that, for example, the central bank has been easing interest rates for quite a long cycle now. These have steeply reduced to the past couple of months, which has opened up credit markets. There's quite a bit of the stability now with the exchange rate to the dollar, which was not the case a few months ago, or rather a time like between 2023 and 2024, and that has really helped to bring a bit of stability into the market. Inflation is also looking a bit more stabilized within target reaches of the central bank's targets, and at least that's things that we can consider as looking good on that side. Business-wise, I think Kenya is not a stranger to the geopolitical tensions that are existing in the world. There's what is happening outside our economies, particularly influenced by, just because of how integrated we are with the global economy, and that has affected both our exports and costs of imports, but also locally, of course, there's various activities going on, or rather, which have had an impact on how smoothly business has been running. But on a general, there's silver linings where you will wish to look for them. Exponentially so. It's a very interesting state of affairs because, for example, if I may give an example of the firm I'm at, Bowman's, Coulson Honey LLP here in Nairobi. We are one of the, I think we are the only firm which has a specialized competition practice in Kenya. But when you look outside that, you can see that there's an increased uptake amongst smaller and younger firms, as well as bigger firms, to specialize more in particular areas of law, where you'll find very niche areas are also starting to pick up. I think the one which has the most vigor at the moment probably is data protection in the country, since our act came in 2019, and there's been an upsurge of that, as well as tax, because of increased enforcement action from the Revenue Authority. What you're seeing is people are becoming much more knowledgeable, much more specialized, and it's ceasing to be just that lawyers want to be just lawyers. They want to be business advisors, or at least that's what we're seeing clients demanding of us. And as a result, you're seeing an evolution of people moving away from simply regurgitating what is in the law to now thinking more from a business angle. and of course that increases the competition at the top and also at the middle tier of legal practice here. And so it's a very interesting time to be practicing in Kenya. That is a very interesting state of affairs at the moment. I think the one thing which comes top of mind is that the banking sector in particular seems to have quite a little. There seems to be a fire which has been lit under it at the moment, mainly because one. Just as of a few months ago, the central bank lifted a 10-year moratorium which it had placed on the licensing of new banks. That coupled with a increase in core capital requirements, the banks are now required to have 10 billion Kenya shillings core capital by 2029, that December, and that will be progressively increasing. It's a staggered increase. That of course is going to trigger both consolidation within the market, quite a bit of merger and acquisition activity in that sector. We're also going to probably see quite a bit of capital injection from parent companies where they have parent companies that are well funded or are able or are willing to put in extra funds there, and that has already started being seen. On the M&A, further go on the M&A side of things, if you look at, I think from a PE perspective, the private equity industry at the moment, how I see it, or how, and this is arguable, is that I do not foresee that there will be quite a bit of purchases or entries at the moment. It feels like the deal pipeline at the moment seems to be more about PE funds which are coming to the end of their lifeline or with the tenure of the term of the fund, and they're making exits where their investment in various investments the investments are matured and making their exits, and probably just because of the global uncertainties that exist, I think people are kind of on a wait and see approach. So largely the M&A activity, as it currently stands, I would imagine I see it as currently still staying at par with previous years. But where you're seeing it right now is more about making strategic entries rather than where it's simply the trends that were existing before. I think on a competition, there's also a really interesting phase or development that is occurring on the competition space at the moment, because this affects, I think, not only mergers and acquisition, but also just the general antitrust regulation ecosystem, where we have the COMESA Competition Commission, which is revising its regulations. We anticipate this will happen by the end of this year or early next year. There's quite a bit of shift that will happen there on how the CCC will be enforcing its actions. And when you tally up at that as well with the East Africa Community Competition Authority, which is also going to be starting its enforcement action, or rather its merger approval process, or from October of this year, there's quite a bit of developments both on a local level and a regional level that affect the Kenyan market, and also beyond. Of course, we can put that also in the context of Africa-wide developments, if you put the AFCFTA and how it's developing. I think the last point probably that I would think of is on the capital markets end, there's quite a bit of development where seems like an almost muted resurgence, but there's quite a number of new products in the pipeline. Investors are looking for something new. The IPO market is kind of dry at the moment, but on a more novel products, we're seeing quite a bit of an uptick on money market funds, rates, ETFs, where there's quite a bit of activity in that side of things. It's at par with the general market. There's it's matching up to what happens with the general market, where I wouldn't say that it's exceptional job growth, and I wouldn't say that it's shrinking. It seems to be a state where it's on a needs basis, but what is rather evident is that there's a race for talent, where the top talent is really in demand, and also because also not only are the firms looking out for top talent, and not just people who are able to understand the law, but as I said earlier, who understand the business side of law, but also in-house opportunities are also looking for the same thing, to try and inculcate that within their own firm, within their own within their own spaces. So it's something which is seemingly at par with the rest of the market, of the industry. I think at the moment, the key thing, and it's curious that I say this as we're recording, we're deep in the tax season here in Kenya, but I think one of the greatest things that is currently happening here in Kenya right now, or one of the key focus points, is it's about tax compliance, tax planning, tax structuring. I think in the past couple of years we have seen a significant upsurge in not only tax disputes and tax compliance requests, but also clients who are taking up strategic tax advice, where they're deciding to be more proactive rather than reactive to, say, enforcement actions or tax assessments from the Kenya Revenue Authority. And in this case, what we have seen is more, because of the fluid state in which our tax regime can exist. Businesses are trying to think ahead and try and avoid leakages, and try and just make sure that how their business is structured is in a manner that enables them to operate as optimally as possible. And I think that is something which will continue to be seen for the near future, and it's probably a space to watch.